What's up, Mysterious Huntsman fans? This is Paul, and welcome back to another episode of Mysterious Huntsman. Tonight, we're going to hear from Ray and Rose, who are originally from Indiana, telling us their story about a UFO landing and cover-up. Also going to hear some ghost stories. So let's sit back and welcome Ray and Rose to the Mysterious Huntsman family. Hey, Ray, this is Paul from the Mysterious Huntsman Show. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing great, and I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I know you are originally from Indiana and now living in Minnesota, and you guys have some incredible stories. I appreciate you reaching out to me because you're going to talk about some things tonight that I'm very close to, and it's something I've researched my entire life. So I can't wait to let everyone hear your story. So whenever you're ready, just go ahead.
Well, this first story starts probably, and I would say somewhere around the late 1950s, maybe 1958, 59. This happened in Fair Oaks, Indiana. It's a very small, or it was a very small town south of DeMotte, Indiana. And what had happened was a man that my mother worked with at U.S. Steel, he and his wife and their sons lived in Fair Oaks. And Fair Oaks was, when I say a small town, I mean maybe 100 people. And it was maybe there was one store and maybe a gas station. I mean, it wasn't like a town. And it was all surrounded by farms. And one night, one of the farmers was combining. Late at night, it was dark. And way off in the distance, he sees this light. And he didn't pay too much attention, and he kept going. But he noticed, the light kept getting closer and closer and closer. And, pretty soon, the light was hovering over him. He began hearing this humming sound. All of a sudden, this light, it was not huge. It was over him, and it was hot. And it was humming, pretty loudly. And he got scared. He actually got scared, and he jumped off the combine, and he ran to the house. And evidently he called the police. So I'm thinking, from the way my mother had told me the story, that by the time he got to the house, maybe this was 10, 11 o'clock at night. By morning, by first light, the Army was there. When they got back to the site where the combine was, it had melted.
Wow.
The combine was melted. It was no longer a combine. It was melted. And the whole ring around where this combine was just scorched earth. And here comes the Army Corps of Engineers. I think there was some Army there. Certainly there was police. And they cordoned off the people in the town, and they told them that they weren't to say anything. Somehow they got equipment in there, and they took away this mangled piece of combine on a flatbed, and it was covered. And then they either they got a combine or something, and they dug the field, so you couldn't see anything. And they were sworn to secrecy. When I say the whole town, I don't know how big that town was. Somebody can check the census. It was a very, very small town. But the man that told my mother, and they were friends of my parents, the name was Conley, and that was spelled Conley, and it was Lowell and Barbara Conley. They both since passed. They moved to McAllen, Texas, but they're both dead now. And Barbara Conley came to my dad's wake in 2002, and I remember talking to her about this very incident. And she just smiled, and she says, yes, that did happen, and we'd like to forget it. Now, I remember my mother telling me the story, and I was probably 13, 14 years old, somewhere in that area. And I just remember my mother being very concerned. She said because Lowell was scared to death, and he was told by the police and the Army, or it was either the Army or the Army Corps of Engineers. They were dressed like the Army, and the whole family was sworn to secrecy. They couldn't talk about it. It never hit the newspapers. Nothing ever happened. Now, that was in Fair Oaks, Indiana.
You said Fair Oaks?
Fair Oaks.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's one word or two.
Right.
But Fair Oaks, Indiana.
I wonder if he actually had some complications. You said the combine melted. I wonder if he actually had some medical conditions due to that, or any kind of radiation poisoning, or did you ever hear of anything like that?
Nothing. We never heard anything after that. Evidently, from the time this Lowell Conley told my mother, I think it was maybe a year, maybe two, when she told me. But I remember when she told me, it was almost like she was distressed. I mean, she was, you could tell that it bothered her because this was her friends, and this was out of the norm. I mean, the man that this happened to was just a pillar of the community. I mean, he was not, an alcoholic or on drugs or anything like that. He just was a regular guy, and he said that he was okay until it kept getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and then he could feel the heat. Then actually, the metal on the combine, it was too hot to touch. And that's when all of a sudden he freaked out and just jumped off and ran to the house. And of course, then the rest is history. But he said when he got back out there, I mean, it was melted. There was nothing left. It was just a heap of just metal.
Right, and I'm sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say I'm sure they took every bit of it with them when they left.
Oh, they did. Because he called the police.
Right.
He went to the house. He called the police. Now, who the police called and who was called first and who appeared first, I don't know that. All I know is within a very short period of time, this was the area was surrounded, and that particular area was cordoned off by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Army. And then there were other men there, like G-men in suits and everything, that were talking with not only that family, but the neighbors too. And you didn't see anything, and you're not to speak of this. And like I said, it never hit the newspaper, and I don't think Fair Oaks itself was big enough to have a newspaper. But certainly, DeMott or Lowell and I used to own a restaurant in Lowell, so certainly there were some towns around there that were of decent size that did have newspapers that certainly could have, printed it, but nobody ever did.
And you have to wonder how many times has this happened and the government was able to squelch it,
I mean, I'm the kind of person that you don't know where the natural ends and the supernatural begins, and I'm not an alarmist, nor do I don't make things up. It is what it is. But when you know that the people that these stories are coming from are credible,
right?
And I could see on my mother's face, even at that young age, that she was really disturbed by that. She was really disturbed by that. And why she told me, I'm not really sure. I'm really not even sure why she mentioned it. I don't remember the conversation leading up to it, and I never mentioned it after that. I mean, it was years, probably 20, 30 years, before I mentioned it to anybody.
Well, it's an amazing account, and I love to hear it because I can tell that, she was telling you, the truth, or she was telling you what she knew. And, you don't hear too many stories like that, that, like you said, from credible people that you can actually believe and count on, that they actually experienced something.
Yeah, and there was no dog in the hunt, if you will.
Right.
I mean, there was nothing, certainly my mother or myself, I mean, there was nothing to gain, by that. It was just something that happened. And when you think back, and over the years, several things have happened to me, and I just sort of passed it off, Paul. I would say things like, "Well, I'm not psychic," and I'm not saying that I am, but there are certain things that have happened to me in my lifetime that certainly gives me pause to think that there is something else there.
Right.
And
Well, and you said you had several accounts that you'd like to share with us, so feel free to segue into the other one if you'd like.
well, in 1977, April of 1977, I was 29 years old. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she was given 6 months to live. And so through that time, anybody getting that diagnosis and, with the family, it's a terrible time. But we were close as a family, and we dealt with it the only way we knew how. And so the last couple of weeks of her life, when she was in the hospital, I would just say to her each night before I left, "Mom, is there anything I can get you before I go?" And she would say, no, I think I'm okay. I'll see you tomorrow. Well, this one particular night, I said the same thing. And she said, I said, "Mom, is there something I can get you before I go?" And she said, "No, but is there anything I can get you before I go?" And so that kind of got me. So I went over and I sat on the edge of the bed, and we kind of laughed together. We cried together. We had a nice talk. And I remember saying to her, she says, "Is there anything that I can do for you?" And I said, "Well, Mom, if you could," I asked her if she was afraid to die. And she said, "No." She said, "I'm not." And she says, "None of us are going to get out of this alive." And we laughed, And I said, "Well, if there's something that you can do for me, if you get there, if you get on the other side, could you come back and let me know you're okay?" And she smiled and she said, "I will if I can." So she died October 28th, and my mother was my best friend. So from October 28th to Christmas, which was just around the corner, was just a very hard time. It was, hard time for my father. My brother was home from the service with his wife and 2 little girls staying in my house. And so here comes Christmas Eve, and I'm angry. I'm really angry. My mother has been taken from me, yet there are horrible people running the face of the earth that shouldn't be here. And that was my mindset then. And I was just angry, and I was angry at God, and there is no God. And, I was saying some pretty rough things.
Sure.
And so this was Christmas Eve. So my brother and his wife and the kids, they go to bed. My father goes to bed. It must have been, I was staying in the family room. I was trying to sleep on the couch. And it must have been 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Something awakened me. And when I looked across the room, and there was nothing in the room except me, there was this fog. It was in the corner of the room by the television, and this fog was huge. And this fog, no shape, no face. This fog was moving toward me across the room. When it got to the coffee table, I mean, I'm now frightened. I'm kind of pushing back against the couch, and I can't go anywhere. And whatever this fog was stopped. And it kind of turned, and just, there was a big window. And it just kind of faded right through the window. Now, from that moment on, I had this euphoric feeling. I mean, I can only explain it as if I had one wish in the entire world, it would not be for world peace. It would be that every human being could feel that. And whatever that was, I don't know. Call it God, call it an angel, call it a spirit, I don't know. Whatever it was letting me know that she was okay.
Wow.
That she was okay. And from that moment on, Paul, I didn't have that. I grieved, but I wasn't angry anymore.
Sure.
I didn't have any anger. I was okay. I mean, I missed her. I cried for her, but I didn't have that anger, and I certainly did my apologies to my creator.
Right, right.
So there was that instance, and then there was an instance where I rented a house. My significant other and I had rented a house, and I was in bed. Don't know what. There was nothing really going on in the house, except in the middle of the night, something whacked me on my shin. I was sound asleep. I was dead asleep. And I awakened, and I mean, it hurt. And I got up. I went to I was the only one in the room. Got up, went to the bathroom to look at my shin. And it hurt to touch. Holy smoke, what the heck happened to me? And so I'm now wide awake, so I stayed up for a little bit, went back to bed. And I did fall asleep. And it happened again. Only not quite as hard. So I got up, I went to the living room. I was almost limping. It hurt that badly. And when I pushed on the bone, it just hurt like sin. And so I was up maybe an hour. I went back to bed, fell back to sleep. It never happened again. But when I awakened the next morning, the first thing I did was touch my leg. And it was not sore. It was not sore. And there was something in that house because the other two ladies that were living in that house all had things happen to them in that house. So that was the story on that house. The other instance was probably 1982. A very good friend of mine that lived in Indiana he had a I don't want to say he was hemophiliac, but he did have sort of a blood disorder. I don't think it was cancer, but there was something where he had some sort of blood disorder, and he had to have multiple transfusions. And through the transfusions, he got AIDS. And of course, in the beginning they didn't know.
Right.
And so they took him to one of the university hospitals in Chicago. And his name was Tom. And Tom was just a real sweetheart of a guy. And Tom loved women. I mean, Tom just loved women. That was his thing. He just loved women. And big, tall, short, big. I mean, he just loved women. And he was a real charismatic guy. And so he always wore this cologne called Antaeus. And I was called, if I wanted to see Tom alive, to come to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and I remember walking into his room, and I was alone. And I remember I think he was in a coma. And I remember just putting my hand over his forehead and talking to him. And just saying, Tom, it's okay. You can go now. Just save me a place, And the nurse came in, and she says, you really shouldn't touch him. And I just looked at her, and I said, he's my friend. And so, a day or two later, Tom passed away. I was living in Indiana, but I had to go to Chicago for something. When I did, I was in a meeting, and there was a break in the meeting, and I had to use the restroom. Well, the restroom on the floor that I was at was closed. They were doing renovations, so you had to get a key, take the elevator up to this other floor that was completely empty. So I got off the elevator. I, went in, took the key, went in to the restroom. And when you entered the restroom, it was probably a 30 by 30 foyer. And there were couches and lounge chairs, and there must have been this huge mirror. It almost looked like a mirror that dancers would perform in front of. And a huge mirror. And then you went through another area, and then there was the stalls. Okay, so I went to the washroom, and just as I was finishing, I was engulfed in this guy's Antaeus, his cologne. It was like he poured Antaeus all over me. I was engulfed. There was nobody in that whole place but me. Nobody. And it was like his cologne that he wore all the time was just all over me. I could smell it on my hands. I could smell it it was on my clothes. I was engulfed in his Antaeus.
Yeah.
So that was another.
Yeah, and that's something. I mean, that seems to be a common thread among a lot of these encounters or contact events where someone will smell something, whether it's cigar smoke, pipe, cigarettes, perfumes, flowers. There seems to be something that touches people, through the olfactory senses. It's kind of odd that it happens, but you're not the only one that's ever stated this about these occurrences. So it's pretty neat that it's a connection.
With Tom, it only happened that one time. And I think that, and I had said to him, and I have to back up, I do remember saying to him at his bedside, Tom, if you can let me know you're okay. I do remember saying that. And this was several months after that this happened. And so that was another incident. There was another incident, and it was in Illinois, and I had rented a house. Rose and I had rented a house, and and I'll let her tell her story here about the things that she viewed. But during the time we were there, her mother had passed away. Her mother was just a great lady, just a wonderful Italian lady, and we just loved her. And she always her big thing was making her kids, her grandkids, everybody's birthday cake. And it was a special birthday cake. It was just her thing. And so I was in the kitchen in a pantry. And Rose was in the living room. The only two people in the house. And so while I was in that room, I heard Mixmaster. And I just thought Rose was going to, do something. So I turned around and I didn't see anybody. And so when I walked out, I'm looking at the Mixmaster. It was going and it was unplugged. So I yelled for Rose to come in from the living room. I said, "You got to see this. You just have to come in here and see this." So she came in and she saw the very same thing. Here, this Mixmaster was on, yet it was unplugged. And then that was over with. I didn't touch it, but Rose walked over and actually turned it off, but it was unplugged. Yeah, it was going.
That's crazy.
And we both saw that. And then there was a time, another incident in my life when back in Indiana when my grandfather had passed, and I would say this was probably 1971, 71, something like that. And my mother and I were sitting in the dinette. It was 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we were just talking about my grandfather, and it was her father, and what a character he was. And it was in late August or very hot, and all of a sudden the air conditioner went on. We had a window air conditioner back then in the living room, and it too was unplugged. And we both went over together and saw it. And then when we got close enough, when we got, across the room and we were walking toward the air conditioner, by the time we got there, it shut off.
Wow.
So there was 2 incidences. And then the last was here in Minnesota. We bought a house in town, and it was an old house, built in 1933. And from my understanding, there was a man and woman that lived there. He owned the newspaper here in town, and he just loved that house. He built it. He built his daughter's home next door, and he had a tool room down there, and he just loved it. And one night, I was letting my dog out, and all of a sudden, I heard very heavy steps going up to the upper level. And I called downstairs to Rose, and I said, are you downstairs or are you upstairs? She goes, no, I'm downstairs. I said, well, I just heard somebody walk upstairs. And she says, no, I'm downstairs. Now, that happened a couple of times. The other thing that happened was, in that old house, this man had a tool room. And he had an old workbench. It was probably about 6 inches thick. And you could tell that he had done a lot of work on that tool room. And I had mentioned one time when I was in that tool room, I said, maybe I'll, take that bench out and put a nicer one in there. And from that point on, we would leave to go to work in the morning. And then I'd come home at night and the door would be open from the tool room. And during the summer, it was an old house and the wood swells. So you really had to pull on that door to get the tool room door open. So I just thought, well, I just didn't close it, so I shut it. Next day I'd come home, the tool room door's open. Well, it's not such a big deal, but I had a dog and I had a couple of cats, and I didn't want them in there because I had paint and other things in there. And this went on for quite a while. Well, Rose said to me, you might talk to the guy. Well, I didn't know his name, so I called him Willie. And she says, you need to talk to him, and maybe he thinks that you're going to, mess with his tool room. So I closed the door one day. I thought, well, this is crazy. This is just nuts. So, okay, I'll just go ahead and talk to him. So I called him Willie. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you're now Willie. And I said, look, Willie, I don't know why you're doing this, but I said, I don't want my dog or my cats in here. And I said, I don't know what's happening that this door keeps, opening. It's impossible to do. And I said, so I'm going to make you a deal here. Now, Paul, I know this sounds nuts, but this is actually what I said. I said, okay, Willie, I'm going to make you a deal. I promise you I will not remove or touch your workbench. I promise you. I will leave it exactly as it is. I may put a nice piece of plexiglass over it, but I promise you I will leave it as it is. And then before I ended that conversation with Willie, I said, okay, just scratch that. I'm not going to do anything to your bench. I promise you, I will not touch your bench, your workbench. I'll leave it as it is. And do you know, Paul, as God is my witness, that door never opened after that. Now, nobody else was in that house. We both left at the same time. We both checked that door was closed. And you could not just turn it and open it. You really had to pull it. So I don't know what it is, but that's what happened.
Willie really loved his tool bench, I guess.
He loved that tool room.
Right.
And I tried to find out. I think his name was Don. I did find out. I tried to find out as much as I could about him. I think his name was Don. But anyway, I always called him Willie. But anyway, I did find out that he absolutely loved that house. And he got sick and passed in that house somewhere.
Well, there again, you hear of stories like this when people come in and they start to renovate a house or change it completely different. from what the original owners had, and then you hear about this kind of activity stirring up or getting ramped up because of it. It's not uncommon of events.
Well, I guess there was a lot of history there. And the only other thing, and I don't know if this is significant or not, but we both, Rose and I, in the basement a couple of times we saw a white cat. I saw a white cat. I saw a white cat. She saw a black cat. But, just go into one of the rooms. And neither one of us had a white or a black cat. And that was weird because I know what I saw. But then when you looked, our cats were upstairs. There wasn't a cat down in the basement at the time. And it wasn't white or it wasn't black. So, but she had that experience too. And they did have a white and a black cat. We did, yeah. And Rose just said that she had checked with some of the neighbors who had been there for years and years, and yes, they did have a white and a black cat. And the other thing we found was the house had beautiful wood flooring, but there was carpet up the stairs. And I remember trying to clean the stairs with my hands, and I was getting white hair and black hair off of that carpet.
Oh, that's interesting.
We didn't have a white or a black cat. So, you figure the house was very old, and it was built in the 30s, and there was a lot of history there.
Right. Well,
so that's kind of my story. I would like you to talk to Rose because Rose is very psychic. I mean, I don't consider myself psychic. Maybe the people are just trying to get in touch with me. I don't know, but Rose has had some things happen to her. So if you don't mind, Paul, I'd like to turn this over to Rose.
No, I would love to. That'd be awesome.
Okay. 93%. Paul, this is Rose.
Hey, Rose, this is Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How you do, Paul?
I'm doing awesome. I really appreciate you guys coming on here.
Good. Okay. Actually, all of this, most significant stuff happened when we were living at this home in Schaumburg. I believe there was something with the house.
Okay.
But anyhow, this cousin of mine, Lenore, her story is that when her father died, she was at his bedside at the moment his soul left his body. And my aunt, who was witness at the time, said she actually saw this white smoke leave his body and go through Lenore, pass through Lenore. And ever since then, she was very gifted.
Wow.
Okay, right. All right. I'll try and do this in order. Now, this was either very late 80s or very early 90s that we were living in that house. And my son Patrick would visit all the time. In fact, we gave him a key to the house so that while we were working, if he wanted to come over, he could just let himself in. But we were all sitting around the living room. There was Patrick, myself, Marilyn, or Ray, and I believe another friend named Jean. But anyhow, we were all just sitting, talking in the living room. And Patrick said, Mom, since Grandma died, I really miss her phone calls. She used to just call me and say, Patrick, I love you. She didn't have anything else to say. She would just say that. And you could hear the tears in his voice. At that moment, the phone rang. I got up, I answered the phone. There was nobody there. And that was about 10:30 in the evening. There was nobody on the other end of that phone. Okay, now the thing with the mixer is it was my birthday. My mother made everybody's birthday cakes. And it was my birthday, and I believe it was the first one after she died. Yeah, I think that. But anyhow, I had bought a cake. I was having some friends over for cake and coffee the next day. And it was just a little whipped cream cake. And I told Marilyn, I said, you know, I want that cake so bad. I'm going to have a piece and I'm going to go buy another one tomorrow. So I did. I was sitting down eating this. And then all of a sudden, like you said, we heard the mixer. The mix master turned on all by itself. It was unplugged. And I believe to this day that it was my mother making my birthday cake.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, this was my cousin. She was kind of down on her luck. She used to go on circuit with another woman, and they used to do readings for people. I don't know what exactly, but her and this woman had a falling out. And she kind of like put a hex on Lenore and her family. And Lenore was having a really bad time financially. Her husband and, of course, the kids, they needed a job. They didn't have a working car. So my son at the time got a new car, gave me his old car, which I had no use for, but he didn't know what else to do with it because he didn't want to trade it in. So I said, I'm going to give it to Lenore. So the night they came to pick up the car, the telephone rang. I answered it. There was a growling, a horrible growling sound on the other end of the phone. So I just hung it up. There was no voice. It was a growling. So I told Lenore when she came over, and she said, that was the woman. She put a hex on me. There was probably some devil or whatever she had doing this to you. I said, well, you know what? She's going to have to come after me a lot harder than that, because when I hung up that phone, I just let it happen. I just yelled all over, you know, get out of my face. You're not going to stop me from doing what I want to do. You have nothing, to be, and I've never been bothered again with it. I don't know. Lenore's husband got a nice job. Her son got a nice job. They used that car. And I'm hoping I broke her hex.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, and in fact, when we were over at it was a child's funeral. And we were sitting around talking with people and everything. And this man came up to me and he said, do you know somebody named Eleanor? Well, immediately popped in my head, Lenore, you can't get a whole lot closer than that. I said, yeah, I know somebody, but it is Lenore. And he said, well, she is with you constantly. She is always around you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But the biggest thing in my life was that Mixmaster turning on and that telephone ringing when my son was talking about his grandma and how much he missed her.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And I know I love it, and I know my listeners will love hearing these accounts. It sounds like you guys just somehow are connected, to just, I don't know if I should say the other side, but you're connected somehow to things that can reach you and contact both of you at will, and I think that's pretty neat. Yeah.
In fact, if I'm doing something that I've never done before, like let's say a recipe or something that my grandmother used to make that I'm trying to recreate, I just call on my grandma and say, "Okay, Grandma, what do I do here?" And these thoughts pop in my head. And you know, that's a real neat thing. Or if I'm trying to do something that I thought my grandpa would know how to do, I'd call my grandpa and say, Grandpa, what do I do for this? What do I do for that? Or what's the best way to do this? And I would get these thoughts. You know,
Wow.
nothing I saw or felt or anything. I would just get these thoughts, and it was like coaching, you know. So, but that's about the biggest thing in my life.
Oh no,
So I hope that helps you out, Paul.
oh no, they're amazing. Like I said, I appreciate you guys coming on and telling me these stories. I love to hear them, and I know everyone else does too. And it's kind of why I wanted to create this podcast. I wanted to give a platform for people to come on and not be afraid to tell their stories. I wanted them to tell them without fear of ridicule or, you know, anyone like, you know, just thinking they're nuts. You know, because everyone has a story, and you know,
and everybody believes it, even if they say they don't. They believe it.
Right? There are some. You know, you're going to have some naysayers, and you're going to have, you know, the more practical or closed-minded, which I don't mean to lump those two together, but it seems like the more closed-minded people tend to be angrier, if that makes sense. You know, that they're not really open to just listening. You know, and I think if everyone would just listen a little more rather than, you know, just try to talk, they might, you know, change a little bit. if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense, and you are very right. You have to be the biggest threat, I think, are the closed-minded people, because they're missing a lot, and they cause you to miss out on a lot.
Right.
And certainly their children.
Yeah, I agree.
But Marilyn wants to talk to you again.
Okay.
I'm going to give you back to her, and it was wonderful talking to you.
Yes, ma'am. You too.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you.
The other thing that I wanted, and I don't know if you've experienced anything like this. I was talking with Rose here just a short time ago, and the last 10 to 15 years, now, could it have happened sooner? I don't remember. I would say a good 10, 15 years it's been happening, off and on to me. It's most of the time it's when I'm dreaming. But it's almost like there is somebody trying to tell me something, somebody trying to show me something. They're standing in front of me. They're very emphatic. They're trying to. It's like they're trying to get through to me with something, and then sometimes they kind of like deflect or defer off to the side. Instead of being in front of me, you know, it's kind of like off to the left, usually to the left, sometimes to the right. So I don't know whether I'm supposed to be looking to the left or the right. I'm not sure what any of that means. I know it's a person, but I've never seen a face. Never seen a face. And a few times, I've actually not been sleeping. I've been wide awake doing something, maybe sitting in my chair or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's almost like you see something, but you don't really see it.
Okay.
You know, it's like somebody's trying to tell you something. You see this in your mind's eye. You see a picture, but there's not a picture. Boy, this sounds crazy. But there's somebody like talking to me, or sometimes they're pointing their finger, or but I don't see a face.
Right.
Nothing has materialized, but it's almost like I can see what they're saying, and I can almost get it, but I can't, or I haven't.
Right, and
so
I haven't experienced anything. I mean, yes, I've had wild dreams. You know, I've tried to interpret, and by the way, I'm in no way an expert on any of this stuff, but you know, I have have read a lot, researched a lot, and to me it sounds like that, someone's trying to contact you or someone's trying to tell you something, but you're just not quite there yet. Maybe you're not on the, and this may sound crazy, but I'm just telling you what has been theorized, that maybe you're not on the right wavelength or frequency yet, or the vibration level. I mean, there's all kind of terms given that, way to be contacted or way to elevate yourself to be able to pick up things. And it sounds to me like it's trying to come through now in the, not in the dream world anymore, but in the, in the awakened world. So
it's doing both. Now, it's not what I would consider off. It's not often, but it's almost what I would consider random.
Okay.
It's not. And I'm trying now to kind of, when it happens, I kind of try to put the date. Okay, see what the date is, and then look at the dates around it. Is there something that is connecting that? I don't have a clue. I just have no clue at all. But I do agree with you. It's like somebody's trying to tell me something, and I may not be ready, or I'm not on the right, like you said, the right frequency. I'm not, haven't been elevated. I agree with all that.
And who knows? Like you said, it could.
Yeah.
It's, and like I said, I'm no way an expert on any of these things that I talk about or listen to on here, but I like to hear it, and I've read and researched a little bit on every topic. So I'm kind of one of these jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy with it. But just in my research, it sounds like someone's really trying to get through. They're knocking on the door in the dream world, and they say, well, I can't get Ray right now. Let me try her in the woke world. So who knows? They're trying to get you on both levels, it seems like. So I think. Let me
ask you this.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you do for a living?
Well,
What may I ask?
Oh, sure. I'm an open book. So I was a police officer for about 15 years down in Alabama, and now I work as a private investigator, and I'm also a carpenter. So I kind of and I'm a musician. So I kind of do a little bit of everything.
Well, good for you. My brother retired Navy, but he was a police officer as well. And I'll tell you, you talk about you guys having the worst job. I know it's rewarding in some ways, but oh my goodness, I can't give you guys enough credit.
Oh, well,
my. I
can't either. My hat's off to all law enforcement and first responders and military. They, everybody. We really had or still have our hands full. So my hat's off to all of them.
Yep, ours too. We're very patriotic. Like I said, my dad, I come from a military family. My dad was in World War II. He was in the Bulge. He was in Normandy. And, the 5 major battles in World War II, yet never spoke of it.
Right.
And, he had it tough. But he would always say, well, the guys in the Pacific had it worse. The guys in the Pacific had it far worse.
Yeah.
Never. So.
Yeah, and I was gonna say my dad was the same way. He was a Navy guy, and he was in World War II. He was out there he was in the Pacific. He was in the Okinawan campaign, and touched on Pearl Harbor some. So it was pretty tough. But he never spoke about it, never bragged about it. But super, super patriotic. Loved his country for sure.
Well, I'm very fortunate that I'm semi-retired. Both of us and I were more into naturopathic medicine, and so we do a lot of we used to manufacture herbal supplements. So we did it for major companies like Whole Foods and Costco, and big name companies, even medical doctors, and. So our main thing is helping people. If we feel if we can help people, you know, then it's a good day.
Right.
You know, it's a good day. And but this other friend that I will you know, turn over to you, her name is Eva Smith, and she's the lady that knows all these people, that this Nasara lady, and I mean, she knows a whole bunch of people, and she's a veteran. She's I don't know if she's retired, but she was in the Air Force.
Okay.
And
yeah, you were telling me earlier when we were talking before the show. I would be very interested in speaking with her. So yeah, anytime she's ready, you have my information. You have my phone number, and I'll send you my email address also, just in case. But
you know, let me trying to think here. Paul, why don't you give me your phone number?
All right. Well, let me send that to you over. I'll text that to you when we get off the phone, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. If you'd text me your phone number, your email, all of that, because I'll be talking with Eva probably sometime this week.
Okay.
And then she can, you know, touch base with you, and you guys can touch base with each other. And
that sounds good.
But yeah, you know, I can't really think of anything else. I'm sure there's something, but right now I think that's about it.
Well, that's plenty. I appreciate, you know, both of you coming on and telling me all of these stories. They're great stories, and I'm gonna let you guys go. And like I said, feel free to contact me anytime.
Well, thank you very much, and please let me know through the link, how we can listen to this.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
you want to edit it, if there are things that you see that need to be edited out, feel free to do it. I mean, just you use your own judgment.
All right, I try not to do so much of that. That's extra work, so I try not to do that. So, but thank you so much, guys, and hope you have a great evening, and we will be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And that's a wrap on this episode of Mysterious Huntsman. I really appreciate everyone listening in and sending in their messages. Don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can reach me at mysteriousHuntsman@gmail.com or send me a message on my Facebook page. You can also find episodes on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram. So just keep them coming, guys. We're all loving it. Thanks, and have a great week.